All right, the plan is Dracula read aloud and Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom. It's gonna be live.
In a world where chaos reigns, and connections seem fleeting, one visionary endeavor seeks to bring us all together. Zen Theatre Live After Dark. Harnessing the transformative power of artificial intelligence, the timeless charm of radio theater, the wisdom of books, and the excitement of video games. Zen Theatre Live After Dark illuminates the path to enlightenment and fosters a sense of unity among its audience. Through this unique fusion of storytelling and interactive experiences, we aim to nurture personal growth, improve learning, and inspire a peaceful existence. Guided by your obedient servant, Sebastian Saint Serapian Smalls, we embark on a journey of self-discovery. But where do we begin? Begin by simply listening, slow down, see just how peaceful today can be. Together, we shall create a harmonious community, bound by shared passions and a desire to elevate the human experience. Sebastian Saint Serapian Smalls will be there, to the end of the line, my Valentine, guiding you on this journey towards a more serene and enlightened tomorrow. Catch you guys on the flip side.
Greetings, children. It is I, your obedient servant, Sebastian Saint, Spooky, Scholastic, Smalls, Villainy Smalls, Vincent twice, always 1 minute. So, we just finished part 1 on YouTube, and then I needed a sandwich. This is part 2 on Facebook. So, I hope you can follow. Thanks so much for swinging by. Wish us luck and catch you guys on the flip side.
Hi everyone, welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager of the Pacific Beach Library. Thank you for joining me today for day 10 of our read-along together of Dracula by Bram Stoker. We are really getting to some exciting stuff now. We've seen bats, we've had hints of blood-sucking, and so exciting things happening in the world of Dracula. Let's see, get to the proper chapter. All right, so let's go ahead and start out with a little bit of tea. So let's pour out, see what we're enjoying today. Today I have, what did I get? I steeped it about a half an hour ago. Well, I started boiling it about half an hour ago, and then I started steeping it about maybe 15-20 minutes ago because I was doing some work and I wanted to give it a chance to get a little cooler. And of course this tea doesn't say which kind it is, but I do remember now it was a dandelion detoxifying tea. It says it's by Choice Organic Teas. It's a wellness tea. Let's see. This one for me is a little unusual because I do tend to prefer the teas that are a bit sweeter. It's not bad. I mean, it's a really mild tea. It's actually a little less earthy than a green tea, like the Genmaicha, the brown green teas. It's pleasant though. I like it. All right, so let's go in and talk a little bit about what happened in yesterday's chapter. Chapter 9 had some letters going back and forth. Chapter 8, as you may recall, had ended with a couple of cliffhangers. Mina Murray had gotten notification that Jonathan Harker had turned up at a sanatorium, like a hospital, and so she was summoned to go help him, to care for him and to get him healthy enough to come back home to England. And you see Westenra seemed to be recovering a little bit her health after having suffered from Dracula, is what we're gonna suppose. Had enticed her to, come outside. He was sucking her blood on the in the cemetery, and then also from the window of her bedroom at her home. But she seemed to be doing better after his cases of earth, including his body, had been shipped over to his new residence in London. So, what happens in chapter 9 is that we get some word correspondence between Mina Murray, who is now, by the time she's writing this first letter, been married to Jonathan Harker, so she's now Mina Harker, and she's writing to her good friend Lucy from Budapest. And basically she says that she's come up, she's gotten to see Jonathan. He is not doing well, he's very ill, and that the nurses have warned him that, you should not, give him any shots or anything. And basically what he says when they speak is, I can barely fathom what happened there. I'm not sure what actually happened and what was the brain sickness, the brain fever that I suffered from afterwards, because in my memories, it's just so unbelievable. So I don't know if it's the illness making me think that, or if I actually knew what was happening then. It's like, I have this journal of what I wrote. I don't want to look into it. I don't want to know. It's a secret, and I want to start my life fresh here with you, with our married life together. He's like, but I give it to you because I trust you. And she asked you, will you please take it and share my ignorance, and only read it if you must, but never let me know unless, again, you must. And so what she does is she takes it, after they're married, she wraps it in a ribbon, and she seals the ribbon with some wax, and she puts the imprint of the wedding ring into it, and she says, this is my, how much I trust you. We're going to live our lives together, and I promise to you now I will never look in this journal, I'll never read it unless there is some serious reason why I must do so, because I trust you too, and I want to start our new life together. So that's that. Then there's some more letters back and forth. Lucy writes to Mina, basically saying that, she is so happy for Mina, that she's doing well. She set her wedding date with Arthur Holmwood. They're going to be married at the end of September. At the end of August when she sent her that letter. Meanwhile, again, they loved this book. Bram Stoker has a lot of disjointed narrative in the sense of the time, because that letter was dated on August 30th, but then we go back August 20th for the journal entries of Dr. Seward. And Dr. Seward talks about what's going on with Renfield, who's a very odd patient. And basically, Renfield seems to be going through this phase now where he is quiet all night, but rather violently discomposed during the day. And so it's a strange thing. We also switch back over to Lucy Westenra's diary. She basically says she's doing really poorly. She's having odd dreams. She doesn't believe she's sleepwalking, but things are going very weird. And by the way, she's gone back home to London also. She was staying at previously. And so Arthur Holmwood, her fiancé, writes to Dr. Seward, with whom he is a friend. And Dr. Seward, of course, as we know, he also had that relationship with Lucy where he had asked her to marry him as well, but she had said no, that her heart was elsewhere with Arthur. And so Dr. Seward, despite that disappointment with Lucy, he wants to help her. He is a friend to Arthur Holmwood, and he agrees to examine Lucy. He goes to visit her, and he agrees that there is something wrong. He doesn't know what it is, and so he calls in his friend, Dr. Abraham Van Helsing, under whom Dr. Seward had studied. And Dr. Van Helsing, who is from Amsterdam, comes to visit and to examine Lucy as well. And he basically says he has concerns about Lucy's health. He does not want to, he has some thoughts about what it might be, but he doesn't know what it is quite yet. And he says, basically, summon me if she gets worse, but do not be overly anxious if you don't hear from me. Finally, the chapter goes back again to the perspective of Dr. Seward, who is talking again about his patient, who again seems to be doing better, and then he's violent, and then he is desolate. He says, he has deserted me, no hope for me now unless I do it myself. So again, oh, by the way, a bat was observed flying away at the earlier part of the chapter too, so we can assume Dracula left for a while. My assumption is that he was visiting with Lucy Westenra and, sucking her blood, which is why her health went downhill again. The chapter ends with Dr. Seward noting that he has visited with Lucy. She seems to be better, and he's feeling encouraged by this. Then he also goes back, and so if Lucy's getting better, it means we can tell that means Dracula's not with her. In that same passage, then, it seems that Renfield is no longer interested in eating his flies, that he says he is sick of that rubbish and basically he can do better than that. So that implies again that Dracula is in communication with him. There's a few more short entries where Seward communicates to Van Helsing in Amsterdam, giving him little updates like she's doing better. But by September the 6th, terrible change for the worst, come at once, do not lose an hour. And so that's what we're going to resume with chapter 10 after Van Helsing has been informed by Dr. Seward that Lucy Westenra is doing terribly. All right, let's go into chapter 10 today of Dracula. And it begins with letter, Dr. Seward to Honorable Arthur Homewood, 6th September. My dear Art, my news today is not so good. Lucy this morning had gone back a bit. There is, however, one good thing which has arisen from it. Mrs. Westenra was naturally anxious concerning Lucy and has consulted me professionally about her. I took advantage of the opportunity and told her that my old master, Van Helsing, the great specialist, was coming to stay with me and that I would put her in his charge conjointly with myself. So now we can come and go without alarming her unduly, for a shock to her would mean sudden death, and this, in Lucy's weak condition, might be disastrous to her. We are hedged in with difficulties, all of us, my poor son. But please God, we shall come through them all right. If any need, I shall write, so that, if you do not hear from me, take it for granted that I am simply waiting for news. In haste, yours ever, John Seward. 7th September. The first thing Van Helsing said to me when we met at Liverpool Street was, "Have you said anything to our young friend, the lover of her?" "No," I said. "I waited till I had seen you, as I said in my telegram. I wrote him a letter simply telling him that you were coming, as Miss Westenra was not so well, and that I should let him know if need be." "Right, my friend," he said. "Quite right. Better he not know as yet. Perhaps he shall never know. I pray so. But if it be needed, then he shall know all. And, my good friend John, let me caution you. You deal with the madmen. All men are mad in some way or the other, and inasmuch as you deal discreetly with your madmen, so deal with God's madmen too, the rest of the world. You tell not your madmen what you do, nor why you do it. You tell them not what you think. So you shall keep knowledge in its place, where it may rest, where it may gather its kind around it and breathe. You and I shall keep as yet what we know here, and here." He touched me on the heart and on the forehead, and then touched himself the same way. "I have for myself thoughts at the present. Later, I shall unfold to you." "Why not now?" I asked. "It may do some good. We may arrive at some decision." He looked at me and said, "My friend John, when the corn is grown, even before it has ripened, while the milk of its mother earth is in him, and the sunshine has not yet begun to paint him with his gold, the husbandmen, he pull the earth and rub him between his rough hands and blow away the green chaff, and say to you, 'Look, he's good corn. He will make a good crop when the time comes.'" I did not see the application and told him so. For reply, he reached over and took my ear in his hand and pulled it playfully, as he used long ago to do at lectures, and said, "The good husbandman tell you till then because he knows, but not till then. But you do not find the good husbandman dig up his planted corn to see if he grow. That is for children who play at husbandry, and not for those who take it as the work of their life. See you now, friend John. I have sown my corn, and nature has her work to do in making it sprout. If he sprouted all, there's some promise, and I wait till the ear begins to swell." He broke off, for he evidently saw that I understood. Then he went on gravely. You were always a careful student, and your casebook was ever more full than the rest. You were only students then. Now you are a master, and I trust that good habits have not failed. Remember, my friend, that knowledge is stronger than memory, and we should not trust the weaker. Even if you have not kept the good practice, let me tell you that this case of our dear Miss is one that may be, I say, may be, of such interest to us and others that all the rest may not make him kick the beam, as your people say. Take then good note of it. Nothing is too small. You put down in record even your doubts and surmises. Hereafter, it may be of interest to you to see how true you guess. We learn from failure, not from success. When I described Lucy's symptoms, the same as before, but infinitely more marked, he looked very grave, but said nothing. He took with him a bag in which were many instruments and drugs, the ghastly paraphernalia of our beneficial trade, as he once called, in one of his lectures, the equipment of a professor of the healing craft. When we were shown in, Mrs. Westenra met us. She was alarmed, but not nearly so much as I expected to find her. Nature, in one of her beneficent moods, has ordained that even death has some antidote to its own terrors. Here, in a case where any shock may prove fatal, matters are so ordered that, from some cause or other, the things not personal, even the terrible change in her daughter to whom she is so attached, do not seem to reach her. It is something like the way Dame Nature gathers round a foreign body and envelopes with some insensitive tissue which can protect from evil that which it would otherwise harm by contact. If that be an ordered selfishness, then we should pause before we condemn anyone for the vice of egoism, for there may be deeper root for its causes than we have knowledge of. I used my knowledge of this phase of spiritual pathology and laid down the rule that she should not be present with Lucy or think of her illness more than was absolutely required. She assented readily, so readily that I saw again the hand of nature fighting for life. Van Helsing and I were shown up to Lucy's room. If I was shocked when I saw her yesterday, I was horrified when I saw her today. She was ghastly, chalkily pale. The red seemed to have gone even from her lips and gums, and the bones of her face stood out prominently. Her breathing was painful to see or hear. Van Helsing's face grew set as marble, and his eyebrows converged until they almost touched over his nose. Lucy lay motionless and did not seem to have strength to speak, so for a while we were all silent. Then Van Helsing bent into me, and we went gently out of the room. The instant we had closed the door, he stepped quickly along the passage to the next door, which was open. Then he pulled me quickly in with him and shut the door. "My God," he said, "this is dreadful. There is no time to be lost. She will die for sheer want of blood to keep the heart's action as it should be. There must be transfusion of blood at once. Is it you or me?" "I am younger and stronger, Professor. It must be me." "Then get ready at once. I will bring up my bag. I am prepared." I went downstairs with him, and as we were going, there was a knock at the door. When we reached the hall, the maid had just opened the door, and Arthur was stepping quickly in. He rushed up to me, saying in an eager whisper, "Jack, I was so anxious. I read between the lines of your letter and have been in an agony. The dad was better, so I ran down here to see for myself. Is not that gentleman Dr. Van Helsing? I am so thankful to you, sir, for coming." When first the professor's eye had lit upon him, he had been angry at his interruption at such a time. But now, as he took in his stalwart proportions and recognized the strong young manhood which seemed to emanate from him, his eyes gleamed. Without a pause, he said to him as he held out his hand, "Sir, you have come in time. You are the lover of our dear Miss. She is bad, very, very bad. Nay, my child, do not go like that." For he suddenly grew pale and sat down in a chair, almost fainting. "You are to help her. You can do more than any that live, and your courage is your best help." "What can I do?" asked Arthur hoarsely. "Tell me, and I shall do it. My life is hers, and I would give the last drop of blood in my body for her." The professor has a strongly humorous side, and I could, from old knowledge, detect a trace of its origin in his answer. My young sir, I do not ask so much as that. Not the last. What shall I do? There was fire in his eyes, and his open nostril quivered with intent. Van Helsing slapped him on the shoulder. Come, he said. You are a man, and it is a man we want. You are better than me, better than my friend John. Arthur looked bewildered, and the professor went on by explaining in a kindly way. Young Miss is bad, very bad. She wants blood, and blood she must have or die. My friend John and I have consulted, and we are about to perform what we call transfusion of blood, to transfer from full veins of one to the empty veins which pine for him. John was to give his blood, as he is the more young and strong than me. Here Arthur took my hand and wrung it hard in silence. But now you are here, you are more good than us, old or young, who toil much in the world of thought. Our nerves are not so calm, and our blood not so bright as yours. Arthur turned to him and said, if you only knew how gladly I would die for her, you would understand. He stopped, with a sort of choke in his voice. Good boy, said Van Helsing. In the not so far off, you will be happy that you have done all for her you love. Come now, and be silent. You shall kiss her once before it is done, but then you must go, and you must leave at my sign. Say no word to Madame. You know how it is with her. There must be no shock. Any knowledge of this would be one. Come. We all went up to Lucy's room. Arthur, by direction, remained outside. Lucy turned her head and looked at us, but said nothing. She was not asleep, but she was simply too weak to make the effort. Her eyes spoke to us. That was all. Van Helsing took some things from his bag and laid them on a little table out of sight. Then he gave the nurse and went over to the bed, said cheerily, now, talk like a good child. See, I lift you so that to swallow is easy. Yes, she had made the effort. It astonished me how long the drug took to act. This, in fact, marked its The time seemed endless until sleep began to flicker on her eyelids. At last, however, the narcotic began to manifest its potency, and she fell into a sleep. When the professor was satisfied, he called Arthur into the room and bade him strip off his coat. Then he added, "Let me have one little kiss while I bring over the table. Friend John, help to me." So neither of us looked whilst he bent over her. Van Helsing, turning to me, said, "He is so young and strong, and of blood so pure that we need him to different." Then with swiftness and with absolute method, Van Helsing performed the operation. As the transfusion went on, something like life seemed to come back to poor Lucy's cheeks, and through Arthur's growing pallor, the joy of his face seemed absolutely to shine. After a bit, I began to grow anxious, for the loss of blood was telling on Arthur, strong man as he was. It gave me an idea of what a terrible strain Lucy's system must have undergone. That would weaken Arthur only partially restored her. But the professor's face was set, and he stood watch in hand, and with his eyes fixed now on the patient and now on Arthur. I could hear my own heartbeat. Presently he said in a soft voice, "Do not stir an instant. It is enough. You attend him, I will look." When all was over, I could see how much Arthur was weakened. I dressed the wound and took his arm to bring him away, when Van Helsing spoke without turning round. The man seems to have eyes in the back of his head. "The brave lover, I think, deserve another kiss, which he shall have presently." And as he had now finished his operation, he adjusted the pillow to the patient's head. As he did so, the narrow black velvet band, which she always seems to wear around her throat, buckled with an old diamond buckle which her lover had given her, was dragged a little up and showed a red mark on her throat. Arthur did not notice it, but I could hear the deep hiss of indrawn breath, which is one of Van Helsing's way of betraying emotion. He said nothing at the moment, but turned to me, saying, "Now take down our brave young lover, give him of the port wine, and let him lie down a while. He must then go home and rest, sleep much, and eat much, that he may be recruited of what he has so given to his love. He must not stay here. Hold a moment. I may take it, sir, that you are anxious of result. Then bring it with you, that in all ways the operation is successful. You have saved her life this time, and you can go home and rest easy in mind that all that can be is. I shall tell her all when she is well. She shall love you nonetheless for what you have done. Goodbye." When Arthur had gone, I went back to the room. Lucy was sleeping gently, but her breathing was stronger. I could see the quadruped move as her breath breathed. By the bedside sat Van Helsing, looking at her intently. The velvet band again covered the red mark. I asked the professor in a whisper, "What do you make of that mark on her throat?" "What do you make of it?" "I have not examined it yet," I answered, and then and there proceeded to loose the band. Just over the external jugular vein there were 2 punctures, not large, but not wholesome looking. There was no sign of disease, but the edges were white and worn looking, as if by some trituration. It at once occurred to me that this wound, or whatever it was, might be the means of that manifest loss of blood. But I abandoned the idea as soon as formed, for such a thing could not be. The whole bed would have been drenched to a scarlet with the blood which the girl must have lost, to leave such a pallor as she had before the transfusion. "Well," said Van Helsing. "Well," said I can make nothing of it." The professor stood up. "I must go back to Amsterdam tonight," he said. "There are books and things there which I want. You must remain here all the night, and you must not let your sight pass from her." "Shall I have a nurse?" I asked. "We are the best nurses, you and I. You keep watch all night. See that she is well fed and that nothing disturbs her. You must not sleep all the night. Later on we can sleep, you and I shall be back as soon as possible, and then we may begin." "May begin?" I said. "What on earth do you mean?" "We shall see," he answered, as he hurried out. He came back a moment later and put his head inside the door and said with warning finger held up, "Remember, she is your charge. If you leave her and harm befall, you shall not sleep easy hereafter." Dr. Seward's diary continued. 8 September. I sat up all night with Lucy. The opiate worked itself off towards dusk, and she waked naturally. She looked a different being from what she had been before the operation. Her spirits even were good, and she was full of a happy vivacity, but I could see evidence of the absolute prostration which she had undergone. When I told Mrs. Westenra that Dr. Van Helsing had directed that I should sit up with her, she almost pooh-poohed the idea, pointing out her daughter's renewed strength and excellent spirits. I was firm, however, and made preparations for my long vigil. When her maid had prepared her for the night, I came in, having in the meantime had supper, and took a seat by the bedside. She did not in any way make objection, but looked at me gratefully whenever I caught her eye. After a long spell, she seemed sinking off to sleep, but with an effort seemed to pull herself together and shook it off. This was repeated several times with greater effort and with shorter pauses as the time moved on. It was apparent that she did not want to sleep, so I tackled the subject at once. "You do not want to go to sleep?" "No, I am afraid." "Afraid to go to sleep? Why so? It is the boon we all crave for." "Ah, not if you were like me. To sleep was to you a presage of horror." "A presage of horror? What on earth do you mean?" "I don't know. Oh, I don't know. And that is what is so terrible. All this weakness comes to me in sleep, until I dread the very thought." "But, my dear girl, you may sleep tonight. I am here watching you, and I can promise that nothing will happen." "Ah, I can trust you." I seized the opportunity and said, "I promise you that if I see any evidence of bad dreams, I will wake you at once." "You will? Oh, will you really? How good you are to me. Then I will sleep." And almost at the word, she gave a deep sigh of relief and sank back asleep. All night long I watched her. I watched by her. She never stirred, but slept on in a deep, tranquil, life-giving, health-giving sleep. Her lips were slightly parted, and her breast rose and fell with the regularity of a pendulum. There was a smile on her face, and it was evident that no bad dreams had come to disturb her peace of mind. In the early morning her maid came, and I left her in her care and took myself back home, for I was anxious about her things. I sent Arthur, telling them of the own work, with its manifold arrears, took me all day to clear off. It was dark when I was able to inquire about my esophagus. The report was good. He had been quite quiet for the past day and night. A telegram came from Van Helsing in Amsterdam whilst I was at dinner, suggesting that I should be at Hillingham tonight, that it might be well to be at hand, and stating that he was leaving by the night mail and would join me early in the morning. 9 September. I was pretty tired and worn out when I got to Hillingham. For 2 nights I had hardly had a wink of sleep, and my brain was beginning to feel that numbness which marks cerebral exhaustion. Lucy was up and in cheerful spirits. When she shook hands with me, she looked sharply in my face and said, "No sitting up tonight for you. You are worn out." "I'm quite well again. Indeed, I am. And if there is to be any sitting up, it is I who will sit up with you." I would not argue the point, but went and had my supper. Lucy came with me, and enlivened by her charming presence, I made an excellent meal, and had a couple of glasses of the more than excellent port. Then Lucy took me upstairs and showed me to a room next to her own, where a cozy fire was burning. "Now," she said, "you must stay here. I shall leave this door open, and my door too. You can lie on the sofa, for I know that nothing would induce any of you doctors to go to bed whilst there is a patient above the horizon. If I want anything, I shall call out, and you can come to me at once." I could not but acquiesce, for I was dog-tired and could not have sat up had I tried. So on her renewing her promise to call me if she should want anything, I lay on the sofa and forgot all about everything. Lucy Westenra's diary, 9 September. I feel so happy tonight. I have been so miserably weak that to be able to think and move about is like feeling sunshine after a long spell of east wind out of a steel sky. Somehow Arthur feels very, very close to me. I seem to feel his presence warm about me. I suppose it is that sickness and weakness are selfish things, and turn your inner eyes and sympathy on ourselves, whilst health and strength give love rein, and in thought and feeling he can wander where he wills. I know where my thoughts are. If Arthur only knew. My dear, your ears must tingle as you sleep, as mine do waking. Oh, the blissful rest of last night. How I slept with that dear, good Dr. Seward watching me. And tonight I shall not fear to sleep, since he is close at hand and within call. Thank everybody for being so good to me. Thank God. Good night, Arthur. Dr. Seward's diary, 10 September. I was conscious of the professor's hand on my head and started awake all in a second. That is one of the things that we learn in an asylum at any rate. And how is my patient? And how is our patient, excuse me? Well, when I left her, or rather when she left me, I answered. "Come, let us see," he said, and together we went into the room. The blind was down, and I went over to raise it gently, whilst Van Helsing stepped with his soft, cat-like tread over to the bed. As I raised the blind and the morning sunlight flooded the room, I heard the professor's low hiss of inspiration, and knowing its rarity, a deadly fear shot through my heart. As I passed over, he moved back, and his exclamation of horror, "Gott im Himmel," needs no enforcement from his agonized face. He raised his hand and pointed to the bed, and his iron face was drawn and ashen white. I felt my knees begin to tremble. There on the bed, seemingly in a swoon, lay poor Lucy, more horribly white and longer than ever. Even the lips were white, and the gums seemed to have shrunken back from the teeth, as we sometimes see the corpse after a prolonged illness. Van Helsing raised his foot to stamp in anger, but the instinct of his life and all the long years of habit stood to him, and he put it down again softly. "Quick," he said, "bring the brandy." I flew to the dining room and returned with the decanter. He wetted the poor white lips with it, and together we rubbed palm and wrist and heart. He felt her heart, and after a few moments of agonizing suspense said, "It is not too late. It beats, though but feebly. All our work is undone. We must begin again. There is no young Arthur here now. I have to call on you yourself this time, friend John." As he spoke, he was dipping into his bag and producing the instruments for transfusion. I had taken off my coat and rolled up my shirt sleeve. There was no possibility of an opiate just at present, and no need of one. And so, without a moment's delay, we began the operation. After a time, it did not seem a short time either, the draining away of one's blood, no matter how willingly it be given, is a terrible feeling. Dr. Van Helsing Helsing held up a warning finger. Do not fear, he said, but I fear that with growing strength she may wake, and that would make danger. Oh, so much danger. But I shall precaution take. I shall give hypodermic injection of morphia. He proceeded then, swiftly and deftly, to carry out his intent. The effect on Lucy was not bad, for the patient seemed to merge steadily into the narcotic sleep. It was with a feeling of personal pride that I could see a faint tinge of color steal back into the pallid cheeks and lips. No man knows, if he experiences it, what it is to feel his own lifeblood drawn away into the veins of the woman he loves. The professor watched me critically. That will do, he said. Already? I remonstrated. You took a great deal more from art. To which he smiled a sad sort of smile and drew wide. He is her lover, her fiancé. You have work, much work to do for her and for others, and the present will suffice. When we stopped the operation, he attended to Lucy, whilst I applied digital pressure to my own incision. I laid down while I waited for pleasure to attend to me, for I felt pleased and needed sick. By and by, he bound up my wound and sent me downstairs to get a glass of wine for myself. As I was leaving the room, he came after me and half whispered, "Mind, nothing must be said of this. If our young lover should turn up unexpected, as before, no word to him. It would at once frighten him and enjealous him too. There must be none." So, when I came back, he looked at me carefully and then said, "You are not much the worse. Go into the room and lie on your sofa and rest a while. Then have much breakfast and come here to me." I followed out his orders, and I knew how right and wise they were. I had done my part, and now my next duty was to keep up my strength. I felt very weak, and in the weakness lost something of the amazement at what had occurred. I fell asleep on the sofa, however, wondering over and over again how Lucy had made such a retrograde movement, and how she could have been drained of so much blood, with no sign anywhere to show for it. I think I must have continued my wonder in my dreams, for sleeping and waking, my thoughts always came back to the little punctures in her throat, and the ragged, exhausted appearance of their edges, tiny though they were. Lucy slept well into the day, and when she woke, she was fairly well and strong, though not nearly so much so as the day before. When Van Helsing had seen her, he went out for a walk, leaving me in charge, with strict injunctions that I was not to leave her for a moment. I could hear his voice in the hall, asking the way to the nearest telegraph office. Lucy chatted with me freely, and seemed quite unconscious that anything had happened. I tried to keep her amused and interested. When her mother came up to see her, she did not seem to notice any change whatever, but said to me gratefully, "We owe you so much, Dr. Seward, for all you have done, but you really must now take care not to overwork yourself. You are looking pale yourself. You want a wife to nurse and look after you a bit. That you do." As she spoke, Lucy turned crimson, though it was only momentarily, for her poor wasted veins could not stand for long and unwanted drain to the head. The reaction came in excessive pallor as she turned imploring eyes on me. I smiled and nodded and laid my finger on my lips. With a sigh, she sank back amid her pillows. Van Helsing returned in a couple of hours and presently said to me, "Now you go home and eat much and drink enough. Make yourself strong. I stay here tonight, and I shall sit up with little miss myself. You and I must watch the case, and we must have none other to know. I have grave reasons. No, do not ask them. Think what you will. Do not fear to think even the most not probable. Good night." In the hall, two of the maids came to me and asked if they or either of them might not sit up with Miss Lucy. They implored me to let them, and when I said it was Dr. Van Helsing's wish that either he or I should sit up, they asked me quite piteously to intercede with the foreign gentleman. I was much touched by their kindness. Perhaps it is because I am weak at present, and perhaps because it was on Lucy's account that their devotion was manifested, for over and over again have I seen similar instances of woman's kindness. I got back here in time for a late dinner, went my rounds, all well, and set this down whilst waiting for sleep. It is coming. 11 September. This afternoon I went over to Hillingham, found Van Helsing in excellent spirits, and Lucy much better. Shortly after I had arrived, a big parcel from abroad came for the professor. He opened it with much impressment, assumed of course, and showed a great bundle of white flowers. These are for you, Miss Lucy, he said. For me? Oh, Dr. Van Helsing. Yes, my dear, but not for you to play with. These are medicines. Here Lucy made a wry face. Nay, they are not to take in a decoction or a nauseous form, so you need not snub that so charming nose. Or I shall point out to my friend Arthur what woes he may have to endure in seeing so much beauty that he so loves, so much distort. Ah, my pretty miss, that bring the so nice nose all straight again. This is medicinal, but you do not know how. I put him in your window. I make pretty wreath and hang him round your neck, so that you sleep well. Oh yes, they, like the lotus flower, make your trouble forgotten. It smells so like the waters of Lethe, and of that fountain of youth that the conquistadors sought over the foreigners and found him all too late. Whilst speaking, Lucy had been examining the flowers and smelling them. Now she threw them down, saying with half laughter and half disgust, "Oh, Professor, I can't have a joke on you. Why, these flowers are only common garlic." To my surprise, Van Helsing rose up and said with all his sternness, his iron jaw set and his bushy eyebrows meeting, "No trifling with me. I never jest. There is grim purpose in what I do, and I warn you that you do not thwart me. Take care, for the sake of others if not for your own." Then seeing poor Lucy scared, as she might well be, he went on more gently, "Oh, little miss, my dear, do not fear me. I only do for your good. But there is much virtue to you in those so common flowers. See, I placed them myself in your room. I myself make the wreath that you are to wear. Hush, no telling to others that make so inquisitive questions. We must obey, and silence is the part of obedience. And obedience is to bring you strong and well into loving arms that wait for you. Now sit still a while. Come with me, friend John, and you shall help me deck the halls with my garland, which is all the way from Harlem, where my friend Vanderpool raised herb in his glass houses all the year. I had to telegraph yesterday, or they would not have been here." We went into the room, taking the flowers with us. The professor's actions were certainly odd and not to be found in any pharmacopoeia that I had ever heard of. First, he fastened up the windows and latched them securely. Next, taking a handful of the flowers, he rubbed them all over the sashes, as though to ensure that every whiff of air might get in before they laid in on the garlic smell. Then, with the whisk, he rubbed all over the jamb of the door, above, below, and at each side, and round the fireplace in the same way. It all seemed grotesque to me. Presently I said, "Well, Professor, I know you always have a reason for what you do, but this certainly puzzles me. It is well we have no skeptic here, or he would say that you were working some spell to keep out an evil spirit." "Perhaps I am," he answered quietly, as he began to make the wreath which Lucy was to wear around her neck. We then waited whilst Lucy made her toilette for the night, and when she was in bed, he came in himself and put a wreath of garlic round her neck. The last words he said to her were, "Take care you do not disturb it, and even if the room is closed, do not tonight open the window or the door." "I promise," said Lucy, "and thank you both 1,000 times for all your kindness to me. Oh, what have I done to be blessed with such friends?" As we left the house in my fly, which was waiting, Van Helsing said, "Tonight I can sleep in peace and sleep well. 2 nights of travel, much reading in the day between, and much anxiety on the day to follow, and I can sit up without to wink. Tomorrow in the morning early, you call for me, and we come together to see our pretty miss, so much more strong for my spell which I have worked. Oh, oh." He seemed so confident that I, remembered my own confidence 2 nights before, and with the baneful result, felt awe and vague terror. It must have been my weakness that made me hesitate to tell it to my friend, but I felt it all the more, like unshed tears. All right, that concludes chapter 10. We'll find out on Monday how effective that garlic was at warding off Count Dracula from making a visit to Lucy Westenra. Thanks again for joining me. I hope you have a wonderful, wonderful weekend. And if you fear anyone coming into your room uninvited, remember, we've learned now from Dr. Van Helsing and from Dr. Seuss, a wreath of garlic just might help you. Take care, friends. I'll see you next time. Bye. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager of the Pacific Beach Library. Thank you for joining me for week 3, day 11 of our read aloud together of Dracula by Bram Stoker. I'm wondering if I could get a longer R each day. And by the end, when we get to chapter 27, it'll be like Dracula. Okay, for today, Dracula. All right. So today's tea is the Earl Grey de la Creme, which is getting really close to the end of my little bag, so I'm excited to try. It's always fun to get to finish up a tea that you've enjoyed, and I have to make the big decision: do we get more of the same tea because I really like it, or do we get a brand new tea to explore? Decisions. All right, let's go ahead and pour this one out. I like this one. It's an Earl Grey tea, but it has just that little bit of vanilla to it, and the leaves and the colors in it are just beautiful because it has the petals from cornflower, I believe it is, and calendula. Let's see, dried cornflower, my bad. Cornflower and sunflower petals, and then it has that bergamot and vanilla flavor mixed in with the tradition, with the Earl Grey tea. It's really good. Delicious. That's a really nice tea. Let's see. So, before we get to talking about yesterday, hello, good to see you, Helen. Before we get to talking about what we read on Friday, I want to let you know about a little something that I just posted in the group. So this is one of those good news, maybe not so great news things, but the great news actually is that San Diego Public Library is expanding our services. We are finally at that point where we're offering 6 days of service now. So at my library, let's go back. There are 12 libraries offering in-person services, limited in-person services. My particular branch, Pacific Beach, is not one of those libraries, but now instead of just Monday through Friday, now we're offering Monday through Saturday service where you can call us. We can help you with reference. If there's a book that you want to check out, we can pull that book for you, check it out, and bring it out to you people who keep outside of our door. And so we're doing a contactless pickup service 6 days a week now instead of 5. That's really good news. The slight little thing that's not so great for our group is that because we are now offering 6 days of service and the number of staff we have are the same, that means that, like, for some of our staff, like myself, I'm now working Monday through Thursday, and then I'm alternating Fridays and Saturdays. And so for our reading, what that means is that I'm not going to be available to do a live reading on Friday anymore. And so I wanted to ask you guys what you would prefer. I'm happy to do either. Hey, I see Pam there too. Let's see, as we continue, would you like us to only do the live readings, which means we would drop our schedule down to only reading Monday through Thursday? Or would you like to do Monday through Thursday where we do this live experience together, and then I'll just pre-tape a segment on Friday? Sorry, Pam was asking. I am a payday Saturday, which means I'm off on payday Fridays, sorry, that is so library speak. I worked this past Saturday, and I'm working this Friday. This is how we have to do our schedule. And then the other Friday the Fridays that I'm off, well, I think it would just be really confusing to have 1 week where we do it one way and 1 week the other. So I'm just thinking I would like us to either go to Monday through Thursday or Monday through Thursday plus a tape segment on Fridays. And so I went ahead and created a poll. It's in our Facebook group. So if you could go ahead and vote as to which you prefer, I'd really appreciate it. And that way I know how you guys want us to keep going for the next couple weeks. And, well, we'll see. Actually, Dracula's just a few more weeks, and then hopefully we'll read another book after that. So, into our future of how we want to continue doing our readings. And so, I'll let you guys vote on that. I'll let you know by the end of the week what we decide, and we'll proceed from there. So, let's talk a little bit about what we read last week. Last week, there was some interesting things happening in chapter 10. Basically, it started out with most of it centered around Lucy Westenra. Lucy's health was fading. At the very end of chapter 9, there had been Dr. Seward had been communicating with Dr. Van Helsing, and he'd been saying, "Oh, she's doing fine," and then she's like, "Oh my goodness, she is not doing fine, and come over here right away." And that's where chapter 10 began, with John Seward writing to his good friend Arthur Holmwood, letting him know can't really tell you much, but Dr. Van Helsing is coming out to see Lucy, and I'll let you know what we discover afterwards. And then it switches over to an entry from Dr. Seward's diary where he talks about his discussion with Dr. Van Helsing. And Van Helsing basically says, Lucy is in grave danger right now. She's very weak. She needs this newfangled thing that science has come up with recently. You may have heard of it. It's called a blood transfusion. Again, keep in mind, this book was published in 1897. Sorry, wrong side. 1897. And a lot of the medical procedures are the new innovations that they're talking about in this book. Things like the shorthand alphabet, writing in shorthand, also doing a blood transfusion. These things that we think of as basic standard stuff nowadays, or in the case of shorthand, even something really antiquated, were brand new innovations back in 1897. And so Dr. Van Helsing says, we need to give this woman a transfusion of blood if we're going to keep her alive. And he's like, I can't do it. I need you. You're younger. And so he's about to literally hook up Dr. Seward to Lucy Westenra and transfer the blood from one person to another. Oh my goodness. But just before they can do it, a knock is heard at the door, and Arthur, the fiance, comes over, and he says, like, I got your letter. I know, like, maybe you can't tell me much, but I want to know what's going on, if I can help in any way. And they say, yes, you can help. Let's take your blood because you're young, you're strong, and you're also, her fiance. You love her, and so it's like, let's go ahead and get your blood. And so they literally they give Lucy some medication. I think it was morphine. Or they give her some sort of opiate to have her pass out. And then they hook up Arthur Holmwood to Lucy Westenra and transfer the blood back and forth. Again, with our modern knowledge of science, it's just kind of, I don't know. I was talking to a friend who donates blood often, and he was saying he thought that was like one of the scariest scenes of the book. Just because it was so unsanitary. And like there's not even any tests to make sure are they the right blood types. It's just blood. They're just giving her blood, whatever kind it is. And so they give her the blood, and she is doing well. She's doing quite well, actually. It helps her recover. The color comes back to her cheeks. Arthur is, feeling a bit weak, and so Dr. Van Helsing is like, well, you've earned a kiss. Go ahead and kiss her. She's passed out, but whatever. He kisses her, and then he leaves, and he goes home. Dr. Van Helsing says, I'm going to go back for now, but I'm going to leave Lucy in your care. What you need to do, and he tells Dr. Seward this very, very particularly, you need to stay awake with her all night when she's sleeping. You need to watch her to make sure that nothing changes for the worse. Again, we know that he's suspicious of there being a vampire but Dr. Seward doesn't realize this. And in fact, actually, there was also a scene too in this chapter where Dr. Van Helsing advises Dr. Seward, as you're writing your notes, write anything that seems like it could be possible, even if it's not plausible. I want to get an idea of what you're thinking about this case and the treatment, and what, when basically you start to realize that there's a vampire. I want to try to see what you could be thinking. Also in this chapter too, right before Arthur leaves, they talk about how Lucy had a velvet band that she wears around her throat with jewelry, and that it's moved out of the way, and the two doctors see the two little prick marks in her neck. And Dr. Van Helsing is rather surprised by it, and Dr. Seward says, I just don't know what to make of it just yet. He later on speculates that it seems like she may have lost blood through that, but how is it possible? There's no blood on the sheets. Where could the blood have gone? Where could the blood have gone? Oh my goodness. So Dr. Seward is advised that he needs to watch Lucy Westenra. He does indeed stay the night, and he watches over her. She wakes up the next day. She's refreshed. She's healthy. She's doing wonderfully. He goes to work. He comes the next evening to her house, and he is going to stay again. By now, he's had, sleepless night, two days of work. He's rather exhausted, and she says, I'm doing so well. You don't need to stay up with me. You're welcome to stay in the room next door to mine. Why don't you leave your door open? I'll leave my door open, and then if I need anything, I'll call out to you. He says that's a great idea, and then he's even drinking at dinner, so he's not going to hear anything. Oh, it's like a recipe for disaster. The next morning, they wake up. Oh, and by the way, it's just terrible. Like, Lucy has a diary entry where she's saying, I feel so healthy. I feel so blessed. I have such good friends. People looking after me. It's going to be wonderful. The next day, when he wakes up, she's doing horribly. And of course, Dr. Van Helsing has come into town, and he shows him, and he's like, oh, look how terribly she's doing. It's like, all the progress that has been made has been lost. It's like, she needs more blood. This time it's got to be you. We can't call her fiance back again. And so they do another transfusion. This time it's Dr. Seward's blood that is given to restore Lucy Westenra. And Van Helsing says, I will stay tonight. You go home, eat, drink, and rest. Make yourself strong. I will stay with her, watch over, and then I have some ideas about things we can do. And so basically, what Van Helsing ends up doing is that he calls to a friend of his over in Harlem, and again, that's Harlem, H-A-A-R-E-M, H-A-A-R-L-E-M. So a Harlem that the New York Harlem was named after, from over in the Netherlands. And so he gets his friend who has glass houses and raised plants to send him a bunch of garlic flowers and roses. And so Van Helsing decorates Lucy's room basically with all these garlic blossoms. He rubs it along the curtains, along the edges of her windows, and he even makes a wreath for her, which I'm guessing is sort of like a lei or a necklace. And he puts that around her and says, you must keep it on, you must have it, and I need you to sleep in peace. And, you keep these things, and, it's not a joke, because she's like, why are you doing dirty garlic? And he's like, no, you must have it. It's very important. The smell will help. And he says, do not disturb it, even if the room feels closed. Do not tonight open the window or the door. And so Van Helsing, again, we know that he strongly suspects what is causing Lucy's blood loss and her weakness, but he's not saying it yet. And then he tells Van Helsing that to watch a little bit longer, that he has things he needs to check on, and that he's going to go. And so Van Helsing is quite confident at this point that Lucy is going to be protected because of the garlic he's left in the room. But the chapter ended with Seward feeling less sure of that, because he had been so certain that Lucy would, recover before that night when Craig passed out next to her and, did not watch her like he was supposed to, and then she woke up feeling rather weak. So that's where we left off. Today's a shorter chapter. Let's see. It is such a good team. All right, chapter 11. It starts out again with Lucy Westenra's diary. 12 September. How good they all are to me. I quite love that dear Dr. Van Helsing. I wonder why he was so anxious about these flowers. He positively frightened me. He was so fierce. And yet, he must have been right, for I feel comfort from them already. Somehow, I do not dread being alone tonight, and I can go to sleep without fear. I shall not mind any clapping outside the window. Oh, the terrible struggle that I have had against sleep so often lately. The pain of the sleeplessness, or the pain of the fear of sleep, and with such unknown horrors as it has for me. How blessed are some people, whose lives have no fears, no dreads, to whom sleep is a blessing that comes nightly and brings nothing but sweet dreams. Well, here I am tonight, hoping for sleep, and lying like Ophelia in the play, with virgin krantz and maiden struments. I never liked garlic before, but tonight it is delightful. There is peace in its smell. I feel sleep coming already. Good night, everybody. Dr. Seward's diary. 13 September. Called at the Berkeley and found Van Helsing, as usual, up to time. The carriage ordered from the hotel was waiting. The professor took his bag, which he always brings with him now. Let all be put down exactly. Van Helsing and I arrived at Hillingham at 8 o'clock. It was a lovely morning. The bright sunshine and all the fresh feeling of early autumn seemed like the completion of nature's annual work. The leaves were turning to all kinds of beautiful colors, but had not yet begun to drop from the trees. When we entered, we met Mrs. Westenra coming out of the morning room. She was always an early riser. She greeted us warmly and said, "I'm glad to know that Lucy is better. The dear child is still asleep. I looked into her room and saw her, but did not go in, lest I should disturb her." The professor smiled and looked quite jubilant. He rubbed his hands together and said, "Aha! I thought I had diagnosed the case. My treatment is working." To which she answered, "You must not take all the credit to yourself, doctor. Lucy's state this morning is due in part to me." "Well, how do you mean, ma'am?" asked the professor. Well, I was anxious about the dear child in the night and went into her room. She was sleeping soundly, so soundly that even my coming did not wake her. But the room was awfully stuffy. There were a lot of those horrible, strong smelling flowers about everywhere, and she had actually a bunch of them round her neck. I feared that the heavy odor would be too much for the dear child in her weak state, so I took them all away and opened a bit of the window to let in a little fresh air. You will be pleased with her, I am sure. She moved off into her boudoir, where she usually breakfasted early. As she had spoken, I watched the professor's face and saw it turn ashen gray. He had been able to retain his self-command whilst the poor lady was present, for he knew her state and how mischievous a shock would be. He actually smiled on her as he held open the door for her to pass into her room. But the instant she had disappeared, he pulled me, suddenly and forcibly, into the dining room and closed the door. Then, for the first time in my life, I saw Van Helsing break down. He raised his hands over his head in a sort of mute despair, and then beat his palms together in a helpless way. Finally, he sat down on a chair, and putting his hands before his face, began to sob, with loud, dry sobs that seemed to come from the very racking of his heart. Then he raised his arms again, as though appealing to the whole universe. God, 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 he said, what have we done? What has this poor thing done that we are so sore beset? Is there fate amongst us still, sent down for the pagan world of old, that such things must be, and in this way? This poor mother, all unknowing, and all for the
Witness
best
the
that
blood
she
moon's
thinks,
rise.
does such thing as lose her daughter, body and soul.
When its red glow
She must
shines
even
upon the
mourn her,
land,
for she died. And then
the
who
ancient
died?
spirits of slain
How we are
monsters return to
protected.
flesh.
How are against us.
Just as they did in a war long
We must see and act.
The world
Devils
is
or no
threatened
devil,
once
or
again.
all the devils at once, it matters not. We fight him all the same. He went to the hall door for his bag, and together we went up to Lucy's room. Once again I drew up the blind, whilst Van Helsing went towards the bed. This time he did not start as he looked on the poor face with the same awful waxen pallor as before. He wore a look of stern sadness and infinite pity. As I expected, he murmured, with that hissing inspiration of his which meant so much. Without a word, he went and locked the door, and then began to set out on the little table the instruments for yet another operation of transfusion of blood. I had long ago recognized the necessity and begun to take off my coat, but he stopped me with the warning hand. No, he said, today you must operate. I shall provide. You are weakened already. As he spoke, he took off his coat and rolled up his shirt sleeves. Again, the operation. Again, the narcotic. Again, some return of color to the ashy cheeks and the regular breathing of healthy sleep. This time I watched as Van Helsing recruited himself and rested. Presently he took an opportunity of telling Mrs. Westenra that she must not remove anything from Lucy's room without consulting him, that the flowers were of medicinal value, and that the breathing of their odor was a part of the system of cure. Then he took over the care of the case himself, saying that he would watch this night and the next, and would send me word when to come. After another hour, Lucy waked from her sleep, fresh and bright and seemingly not much the worse for her terrible ordeal. What does it all mean? I am beginning to wonder if my long habit of life among the insane is beginning to tell upon my own brain. Lucy Westenra's diary, 17 September. 4 days and nights of peace. I am getting so strong again that I hardly know myself. It is as if I had passed through some long nightmare and had just awakened to see the beautiful sunshine and feel the fresh air of the morning around me. I have a dim remembrance of long, anxious times of waiting and fearing, darkness in which there was not even the pain of hope to make present distress more poignant, and then long spells of oblivion and the rising back to life as a diver coming up through a great press of water. Since, however, Dr. Van Helsing has been with me, all this bad dreaming seems to have passed away. The noises that used to frighten me out of my wits, the flapping against the windows, the distant voices which seemed so close to me, the harsh sounds that came from I know not where and commanded me to do I know not what, have all ceased. I go to bed now without any fear of sleep. I do not even try to stay awake. I have grown quite fond of the garlic, and a boxful arrives for me every day from Haarlem. Tonight, Dr. Van Helsing is going away, as he has to be for a day in Amsterdam, but I need not be watched. I am well enough to be left alone. Thank God for Mother's sake, and dear Arthur's, and for all our friends who have been so kind. I shall not even feel the change, for last night Dr. Van Helsing slept in his chair a lot of the time. I found him asleep twice when I awoke, but I did not fear to go to sleep again, although the boughs or bats or something flapped almost angrily against the window panes. The Pall Mall Gazette, 18 September. The Escaped Wolf. Perilous adventure of our interviewer. Interview with the keeper in the zoological gardens. After many inquiries, almost as many refusals, and perpetually using the words Pall Mall Gazette as a sort of talisman, I managed to find the keeper of the section of the zoological gardens in which the wolf department is included. Thomas Builder lives in one of the cottages in the enclosure behind the elephant house, and was just sitting down to his tea when I found him. Thomas and his wife are hospitable folk, elderly and without children, and if the specimen I enjoyed of their hospitality be of the average kind, their lives must be pretty comfortable. The keeper would not enter on what he called business until the supper was over, and we were all satisfied. Then, when the table was cleared and he had lit his pipe, he said, "Now, sir, you can go on and ask me what you want. You'll excuse me refusin' to talk of professional subjects afore a meal. I gives the wolves and the jackals and the hyenas and all our section their tea before I begins to arsk them questions." "How do you mean, ask them questions?" I queried, wishful to get him into a talkative humor. "Ittin' of them over the head with a pole is one way, scratching of their ears is another. When gents as is flush wants a bit of a show-orf to their gals, I don't so much mind the fust, the ittin' with a pole afore I chucks in their dinner, but I waits till they've had their sherry and coffee, so to speak, afore I tries on with the ear scratchin'. Mind you," he added philosophically, "there is a deal of the same nature in us as in them theer animals. Here's you a-comin' and arskin' of me questions about me business, and I that grump like that only for your bloomin' arf quid, it has seen you blowed fust for I'd answer. Not even when you arst me sarcastic like if I'd like you to arsk the superintendent if I might arsk me questions. Without offense, did I tell you to go to L? You did. And when you said you'd report me for using obscene language, that was hitting you over the head. But the arf quid made that all right. I weren't a going to fight, so I waited for the food and did with my owl as the wolves and lions and tigers does. But Lord love your heart, now that the old woman has stuck a chunk of her tea cake in me and rinsed me out with her bloomin' old teapot, and I've lit up, you may scratch my ears for all you're worth, and I won't get even a growl out of me. Drive along with your questions. I know what you're a-comin' at, that dear escaped wolf." "Exactly. I want you to give me your view of it. Just tell me how it happened, and when I know the facts, I'll get you to say what you consider was the cause of it, and how you think the whole affair will end." "All right, Governor. This here is about the old story. That 'ere wolf, what we call Berserker, was one of 3 gray ones that come from Norway to Jamrocks, which we bought off him 4 years ago. He was a nice, well-behaved wolf that never gave no trouble to talk of. I am more surprised at him for wanting to get out nor any other animal in this place, but there you can't trust wolves no more nor women." "Don't you mind him, sir," broke in Mrs. Tom with a cheery laugh. "He's got minded an animal so long, lest if he ain't like an old wolf himself. But there ain't no harm in him." "Well, sir, it was about 2 hours after feeding yesterday when I first heard my disturbance. I was making up a litter in the monkey house for a young puma which is ill. But when I heard the yelping and owling, I came straight away. There was Forsaker, tearing like a mad thing at the bars as if he wanted to get out. There wasn't much people about that day, and close at hand was only one man, a tall, thin chap, with a hook nose and a pointed beard, with a few white hairs running through it. He had a hard look of red eyes, and I took a sort of mislike to him, for it seemed as if it was him as they was irritated at. He had white kid gloves on his hands, and he pointed out the animals to me and said, "Keeper, these wolves seem upset at something." "Maybe it's you," says I, for I did not like the airs as they give us out. I didn't get angry as I hoped he would, but he smiled a kind of insolent smile, with a mouth full of white sharp teeth. "Oh no, they wouldn't like me," he says. "Oh yes they would," says I, imitating of him. "They always like a bone or two to clean their teeth on about tea time, which you as a bagful." Well, it was an odd thing, but when the animals see us a-talking, they lay down, and when I went over to Berserker, he let me stroke his ears, same as ever. That there man came over, and blessed but if he didn't put in his hand and stroke the old wolf's ears too. "Take care," says I. "Berserker is quick." "Never mind," he says. "I'm used to 'em." "Are you in the business yourself?" I says, taking off my hat, for a man what trades in wolves and cetera is a good friend to keepers. "No," says he, "not exactly in the business, but I have made pets of several." And with that, he lifts his hat as polite as a lord and walks away. Old Berserker kept a looking after him till he was out of sight, and then went and lay down in a corner and wouldn't come out the whole evening. Well, last night, so soon as the moon was up, the wolves here all began howling. There wasn't nothing for 'em to owl at. There weren't no one near, except someone that was evidently a-calling a dog somewheres out back of the gardens in the park road. Once or twice I went out to see that all was right, and it was, and then the howling stopped, just before 12 o'clock. I just took a look round before turning in, and bust me, but when I came opposite to old Berserker's cage, I see the rails broken and twisted about, and the cage empty. And that's all I know for certain. Did anyone else see anything? One of our gardeners was a-comin' home about that time from a harmony, when he sees a big grey dog coming out through the gardening edges. At least so he says, but I don't give much for it myself. For if he did, he never said a word about it to his missus when he got home, and it was only after the escape of the wolf was made known, and we had been up all night a-hunting of the park with the sicker, that he remembered seeing anything. My belief was that the harmony got into his head. Now, Mr. Builder, he was talking anyway for the sake of the wolf. "Well, sir," he said with a suspicious sort of honesty, "I think I can, but I don't know as how you'd be satisfied with the theory." "Certainly I shall. If a man like you, who knows the animals from experience, can't hazard a good guess at any rate, who is even to try?" "Well then, sir, I accounts for it this way. It seems to me that ere wolf escaped, simply because he wanted to get out." From the hearty way that both Thomas and his wife laughed at the joke, I could see that it had done service before, and that the whole explanation was simply an elaborate sell. I couldn't cope in badinage with the worthy Thomas, but I thought I knew a surer way to his heart, so I said, "Now, Mr. Builder, we'll consider that first half-sovereign worked off, and this brother of his is waiting to be claimed, when you've told me what you think will happen." "Right you are, sir," he said briskly. "You'll excuse me, I know, for a tapping of you, but the old woman here winked at me, which is as much as telling me to go on." "Well, I never," said the old lady. "My opinion is this, that ere wolf is a-hiding of somewheres. The gardener what didn't remember said he was a galloping northward faster than a horse could go, but I don't believe him, for you see, sir, wolves don't gallop no more nor dogs does, they not being built that way. Wolves is fine things in a storybook, and I dessay when they gets in packs and does be chivying something that's more feared than they is, they can make a devil of a noise and chop it up, whatever it is. But Lord bless you, in real life, a wolf is only a low creature, not half so clever or bold as a good dog, and not half a quarter so much fight in him. This one ain't been used to fighting or even to
way.
providing for himself, and more like he's somewhere round the park a hiding and a shivering of. And if he thinks at all, wondering where he is to get his breakfast from. Or maybe he's got down some area and is in a coal cellar. My eye, won't some cook get a rum start when she sees his green eyes a shining on her out of the dark? If he can't get food, he's bound to look for it, and mayhap he may chance to light on a butcher shop in time. If he doesn't, and some nursemaid goes a walking about with a soldier, leaving the infant in the perambulator, well, then I shouldn't be surprised if the census is one babby the less. That's all. I was handing him the half-sovereign when something came bobbing up against the window, and Mr. Builder's face doubled its natural length with a surprise. God bless me, he said. If that ain't old Berserker come back by himself. He went to the door and opened it. A most unnecessary proceeding, it seemed to me. I have always thought that a wild animal never looks so well as when some obstacle of pronounced durability is between them. A personal experience has intensified rather than diminished that idea. After all, however, there was nothing like custom, for neither Builder nor his wife thought any more of the wolf than I should of a dog. The animal itself was as peaceful and well-behaved as that father of all picture wolves, Red Riding Hood's quondam friend, while smoothing her confidence in masquerade. The whole scene was an unutterable mixture of comedy and pathos. The wicked wolf that for half a day had paralyzed London and set all the children in the town shivering in their shoes was there in a sort of penitent mood, and was received and petted like a sort of vulpine prodigal son. Old Builder examined him all over with most tender solicitude, and when he had finished with his penitence said, "There, I knew the poor old chap would get into some kind of trouble. Didn't I say it all along? Here's his head all cut full of broken glass. He's been a-getting over some bloomin' wall or other. It's a shame that people are allowed to top their walls with broken bottles. This here's what comes of it. Come along, Berserker." He took the wolf and locked him up in a cage with a piece of meat that satisfied, in quantity at any rate, the elementary conditions of the fatted calf, and went off to the court. I came off too, to report the only exclusive information that is given today regarding the strange escapade at the zoo. Dr. Seward's Diary, 17 September. I was engaged after dinner in my study posting up my books, which, through press of other work and the many visits to Lucy, had fallen sadly into arrear. Suddenly, the door was burst open, and in rushed my patient with his face distorted with passion. I was thunderstruck, for such a thing as a patient getting of his own accord into the superintendent's study is almost unknown. Without an instant's pause, he made straight at me. He had a dinner knife in his hand, and as I saw he was dangerous, I tried to keep the table between us. He was too quick and too strong for me, however, for before I could get my balance, he had struck at me and cut my left wrist rather severely. Before he could strike again, however, I thought in my right, and he was sprawling on his back on the floor. My wrist bled freely, and a little pool trickled onto the carpet. I saw that my friend was not intent on further effort, and occupied myself binding up my wrist, keeping a wary eye on the prostrate figure all the time. When the attendants rushed in and we turned our attention to him, his employment positively sickened me. He was lying on his belly on the floor, licking up, like a dog, the blood which had fallen from my wounded wrist. He was easily secured, and to my surprise went with the attendants quite placidly, simply repeating over and over again, "The blood is the life. The blood is the life." I cannot afford to lose blood just at present. I have lost too much of late for my physical good, and then the prolonged strain of Lucy's illness and its horrible phases is telling on me. I am overexcited and weary, and I need rest, rest, rest. Happily, Van Helsing has not summoned me, so I need not forego my sleep. Tonight, I could not well do without it. Telegram, Van Helsing, Antwerp, to Seward, Carfax. Sent to Carfax, Sussex, as no county given. Delivered late by 22 hours. 17 September. Do not fail to be at Hillingham tonight. If not watching all the time, frequently visit and see that flowers are in place. Very important. Do not fail. Shall be with you as soon as possible after arrival. Dr. Seward's diary. 18 September. Just off train to London. The arrival of Van Helsing's telegram told me this day. A whole night long, and I know by bitter experience what may happen in a night. Of course, it is possible that all may be well, but what may have happened? Surely there is some horrible doom hanging over us that every possible accident should thwart us in all we try to do. I shall take this cylinder with me, and then I can complete my entry on Lucy's phonograph. Memorandum left by Lucy Westenra, 17 September, night. I write this and leave it to the scene, so that no one may by any chance get into trouble through me. This is an exact record of what took place tonight. I feel I am dying of weakness and have barely strength to write, but it must be done if I die in the doing. I went to bed as usual, taking care that the flowers were placed as Dr. Van Helsing directed, and soon fell asleep. I was waked by the flapping at the window, which had begun after that sleepwalking on the cliff at Whitby, when Mina saved me, but which now I know so well. I was not afraid, but I did wish that Dr. Seward was in the next room, as Dr. Van Helsing said he would be, so that I might have called him. I tried to go to sleep, but I could not. Then there came to me an old fear of sleep, and I determined to keep awake. Perversely, sleep would try to come then when I did not want it. So, as I feared to be alone, I opened my door and called out, "Is there anybody there?" There was no answer. I was afraid to wake Mother, and so closed my door again. Then outside in the shrubbery, I heard a sort of howl like a dog's, but more fierce and deeper. I went to the window and looked out, but could see nothing except a big bat which had evidently been buffeting its wings against the window. So I went back to bed again, but determined not to go to sleep. Presently the door opened, and Mother looked in. Seeing by my moving that I was not asleep, came in and sat by me. She said to me even more sweetly and softly than her wont, "I was uneasy about you, darling, and came in to see that you were all right." I feared she might catch cold sitting there, and asked her to come in and sleep with me, so she came into bed and lay down beside me. She did not take off her dressing gown, for she said she would only stay a while and then go back to her own bed. As she lay there in my arms, and I in hers, the flapping and buffeting came to the window again. She was startled and a little frightened, and cried out, "What is that?" I tried to pacify her, and at last succeeded, and she lay quiet. But I could hear her poor dear heart still beating terribly. After a while there was the howl again out in the shrubbery, and shortly after that was a crash at the window, and a lot of broken glass was hurled on the floor. The window blind blew back with the wind that rushed in, and in the aperture of the broken panes there was the head of a great, gaunt, gray wolf. Mother cried out in a fright, and struggled up into a seating posture, and clutched wildly at anything that would help her. Amongst other things, she clutched the wreath of flowers that Dr. Van Helsing insisted on my wearing round my neck, and tore it away from me. For a second or two she sat up, pointing at the wolf, and there was a strange and horrible gurgling in her throat. Then she fell over as if struck with lightning, and her head hit my forehead and made me dizzy for a moment or two. The room and all round seemed to spin round. I kept my eyes fixed on the window, but the wolf turned his head back, and fell near me a little speck, blowing in through the broken window, and wheeling and circling round like the pillar of dust that travelers describe when there is a simoon in the desert. I tried to stir, but there was some spell upon me, and dear Mother's poor body, which seemed to grow cold already, for her dear heart had ceased to beat, weighed me down, and I remembered no more for a while. The time did not seem long, but very, very awful, till I recovered consciousness again. Somewhere near, a passing bell was tolling. The dogs all around the neighborhood were howling, and in our shrubbery, seemingly just outside, a nightingale was singing. I was dazed and stupid with pain and terror and weakness, but the sound of the nightingale seemed like the voice of my dead mother come back to comfort me. The sounds seemed to have awakened the maids too, for I could hear their bare feet pattering outside my door. I called to them, and they came in, and when they saw what had happened and what it was that lay over me on the bed, they screamed out. The wind rushed in through the broken window, and the door slammed to. They lifted off the body of my dear mother and laid her, covered up with a sheet, on the bed after I had got up. They were all so frightened and nervous that I directed them to go to the dining room and have each a glass of wine. The door flew open for an instant and closed again. The babe shrieked and then went in a body to the dining room, and I laid what flowers I had on my dear mother's breast. When they were there, I remembered what Dr. Van Helsing had told me, but I didn't like to remove them. And besides, I would have some of the servants to sit up with me now. I was surprised that the maids did not come back. I called them, but got no answer, so I went to the dining room to look for them. My heart sank when I saw what had happened. They all four lay helpless on the floor, breathing heavily. The decanter of sherry was on the table half full, but there was a queer, acrid smell about it. I was suspicious and examined the decanter. It smelled of laudanum, and looking on the sideboard, I found that the bottle which Mother's doctor used was empty. What am I to do? What am I to do? I am back in the room with Mother. I cannot leave her, and I am alone, save for the sleeping servant whom someone has drugged. Alone with the dead. I dare not go out, for I can hear the low howl of the wolf in the house. The air seems full of specks, floating from the window, and from the lights burn blue and dim. What am I to do? God shield me from harmless night. I shall hide this paper in my breast, where they shall find it when they come to lay me out. My dear mother gone. It is time that I go too. Goodbye, dear Arthur, if I should not survive this night. God keep you, dear. May God help me. Wow! That was very dramatic. I'm not reading ahead, as you guys may have figured out. That went from the comedic bit of the zookeeper talking about the wolf that had disappeared to finding out what that wolf had done on behest of Dracula. Oh my goodness. Alright, we'll have to continue tomorrow to see if Lucy Westenra survives the night. We know Dr. Seward is a terrible, terrible babysitter. But yeah, we'll see what happens tomorrow in chapter 12. Oh, I'm really gonna have to fight the temptation to read ahead. Alright, I'm going to not do it so we can discover this together tomorrow. But that was a lovely cliffhanger. Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're gonna end today's reading. As I did mention at the beginning, if you do have a chance to go ahead and vote in the poll as to how you would like us to continue, if we should drop down to just Monday through Thursday for the live streams, or if we should do the Monday through Thursday live streams supplemented by a recording on Fridays. Just let me know what your preference is, and we'll go from there. All right, so thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed today's reading. I certainly did. I feel a lot of suspense about what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay, so I'll see you then. I'll see you tomorrow for more reading of Dracula by Bram Stoker. And until then, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Take care. Bye. Welcome back. I'm Christina, the manager at the Pacific Beach Library. Thank you for joining me for day 12 of our read-along together of, ready, let's go for it, Dracula by Bram Stoker. And so, let's see, today, for tea, I did decide to take the plunge. I'm going to finish off that other tea, so today is the last of our Earl Grey de la Creme. But I have fancy new teas to try tomorrow, so we'll experiment with those. And let's see. This smells so good. You've heard me talk about this tea a lot if you've been reading with me for a while. Hello, good to see you. Out of curiosity, for anyone who's here today, are you drinking anything fun? Also, are you reading anything fun outside of Dracula? I always like to see what folks are reading. I get good ideas from it. Not that I don't already have a huge pile of books at home to read, but you know how it is. You can always have more books to read. That's delicious. And more teas to drink. Alright, so let's talk a little bit before we get into the reading. I posted a poll yesterday afternoon. So far, as of right before we went into today's reading, I looked at the poll results. 8 people had voted that they wanted us to just do the live readings, so that means we would only post readings Monday through Thursday. and no one had voted for the option of having a taped reading on Friday. So I'm just going to call it right now. I figure we've got our decision made. So I'm just going to go ahead and after this week, I'm going to just do the readings Monday through Thursday. This week, I'm going to do one last Friday reading, and the reason is that it just works out with the timing, with the number of chapters that we have, that if we do a reading this Friday and then also Monday through Thursday for the rest of the readings, we will finish up on Thursday, October 29th, which means by Halloween, we will have the conclusion of our tale of Dracula. And then we can make a decision, too, if we want to maybe have a little party, either the following Monday or perhaps on Halloween itself. Ooh. So we'll figure that out later. But for now, the decision has been made. We're going to go ahead and just do the live streams, and our last live stream will be this Friday. Our last Friday live stream will be this Friday, and then we'll keep going after that with just Monday through Thursday readings together. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what happened in yesterday's chapter of Dracula. Yesterday in chapter 11, it was really good. It started out with Lucy Westenra talking about how, fortunate she felt that all these folks were taking care of her. And then Dr. Van Helsing was saying, he was quite smug because he knew that he had left Lucy Westenra surrounded by garlic blossoms and that there was no way that any unwanted visitors of the vampiric sort would be able to enter her room. And when he arrives at the house, again, he's quite happy. Neither he nor Dr. Seward stayed the night because Dr. Van Helsing was so confident that Lucy would be fine. And when they go in there, they run into Lucy's mother, who says, "Oh yes, she's sleeping like an angel. She's not disturbed at all. She's just so calm." And he's like, "Wow, that's great." Because he's like patting himself on the back, like it's because of my wonderful garlic. And then she continues, "Well, it's not all you. I also helped her. I noticed you had these stinky garlic flowers even on her, and so I took them off of her, and I opened the windows, and I aired out the room so she wouldn't get suffocated by the garlic." He's like, "No!" And he didn't want to say anything directly to her because we know that Mrs. Westenra has, she's in poor health and she doesn't need a shock. But of course, when he goes in, he sees that Lucy has, lost more blood in the night, that Dracula did come in. And so he actually, this time, he gives a blood transfusion. So Dr. Van Helsing is the blood donor this time to try to revive Lucy Westenra. After that, there's, the doctor continues to watch over her to make sure that she has the necessary garlic. He warns her mother specifically that, this is part of her treatment. Even if it stinks a little bit, you need to keep it there. And Lucy is actually really pleased. She's saying how, she seems to be doing so well. She's even gotten used to the smell of garlic. She's so happy. She's so healthy. She's so grateful for Dr. Van Helsing and his kind care for her. And then, so that was on the night of the 17th of September. What's interesting after that is that there is a snippet mixed in next from the Tranquil Gazette, which is the newspaper where the reporter talks with the zookeeper. Now, I'm also going to throw in here, too, a little bit of just my own commentary. I do not understand. Maybe this is how they used to do news reports back in the late 1800s. But I cannot believe that there was any news reporter that's actually printing in the dialect of this zookeeper. And as many quotes as he's giving this man about the joke he tells and about the bribery that he's taking to speak with the reporter and all this kind of stuff. Like, if that's actually in the newspaper, I need to read more news reports from the 1890s because this stuff is fun. But perhaps, who knows? In this book, though, with the report from the Pall Mall Gazette, it has a wonderfully colorful account from the zookeeper talking about this wolf that he has there, this strange man, Dracula, who pets the wolf's ears and, kind of weirds out the zookeeper, but the wolf seems okay with it. And then the wolf, he hears a bunch of howling that night, the wolf takes off. The wolf eventually comes back the next day, on the 18th, and they see that the wolf has glass mixed into the fur on his head because he appears to have, gone through, somehow encountered some broken glass. And so the zookeeper takes back the wolf and the reporter celebrates that the community need not be afraid any longer. There's a wolf on the prowl. Then we go back. So that published on the 18th. What we find out then is that going back to the 17th, Dr. Seward mentions how he is grateful not to have to go to visit Lucy Westenra's house that night. He's very tired yet again. He is, he's given blood, he's watched over her, he's tired. Also, that evening, his strange patient, Renfield, comes in and stabs him or strikes him, and he causes blood to drip from Dr. Seward's wrist onto the ground. He bandages up his wrist, and then when he looks down, he sees Renfield lapping up the blood like an animal, drinking it off the ground. It's disgusting. And Renfield saying, blood is life. The blood is the life. Continues then with an account of Dr. Seward noting that there had been a telegram delivered from Dr. Van Helsing to him, which was not properly directed. It didn't list the county in which it was to be delivered, and so therefore the telegram came 22 hours late. So, being a day late, Dr. Seward did not realize he was meant to watch over Lucy that night of the 17th, so she had been unattended that evening. Again, Dr. Seward, terrible, terrible gatekeeper. He might be a good doctor, but he is the worst babysitter. Just terrible. Okay, that said, he rushes then over to check on Lucy Westenra, and he's saying that he's worried about having received this he's worried about receiving this telegram, and so he is, he's going to continue his journal entry once he gets to Lucy's. The next thing we see, the last thing we see in that chapter, is actually a journal entry from Lucy Westenra herself. She writes a note saying how basically she is sure that she is weak and that she's dying and that she may not even make it to the morning. And that she is very disturbed because even though she's been sleeping so soundly and so without fear, she has woken up to hear again the sounds of like a bat or something flapping outside of her window, a bat or a bird flapping. And again, we know it's Dracula. And she's quite disturbed and she's trying to rest. She looks out the window, she sees nothing but a big bat. And then her mother comes in to see her, her very ill mother. And the mother comes in and decides to lie in the bed with Lucy. And she's also disturbed by this noise, the flapping outside, but Lucy tries to reassure her. Suddenly, the window smashes apart when a wolf, the wolf that Dracula had compelled to leave the zoo, rushes in, breaks the glass, and then the mother is so disturbed, she reaches for things and she pulls the garlic flower, the floral wreath off of Lucy, which again is making her vulnerable to the vampire. It all just goes down from there. The mother ends up passing out from the shock. She dies. Lucy is, gets confused by what's happening, and we can presume that Dracula is coming in. The mother dies. The maids come in because they hear the noise, and they're all disturbed about what's going on. She sends the maids down to each have a glass of wine, like to restore them because they've had such a shock upon finding the mother there. And then this is where it gets weird too. When Lucy goes down to see why aren't the maids coming back, she sees that the laudanum that the mother normally takes, which is a what's the word for that? A sedative. That the laudanum apparently has been mixed into the wine by someone, and that the maids are all drugged, and so they're passed out. She's basically alone in the house. The servants are passed out. They've been drugged. Her dead mother is in bed with her. She feels weak and tired. So again, Dracula's already sucked some of her blood and her life force out of her again. And she is just thoroughly disturbed. She is afraid that she's not going to make it to morning. She writes this note saying, I'm going to hide the paper on my breast so that when they find it, when they find my body, they will find this note as well. And she just isn't even sure if she's going to make it to morning. So, the drama. Okay, now we're going to continue with chapter 12, which begins with Dr. Seward's diary. I need a drink too for this. For those of you who have not read it, maybe comment now. You decide for yourself. Do you think Lucy made it through the night, or will she be dead by the time they come? I'm trying to decide if I think she'll be dead or alive. I'm voting for still barely alive, but I don't know. Put your comment if you think, what your thoughts are. Alright, let's go in and find out. Chapter 12, Dr. Seward's Diary, 15 September. I drove at once to Hillingham and arrived early. Keeping my cab at the gate, I went up the avenue alone. I knocked gently and rang as quietly as possible, for I feared to disturb Lucy or her mother, and hoped to only bring a servant to the door. After a while, finding no response, I knocked and rang again. still no answer. I cursed the laziness of the servants that they should lie abed at such an hour, for it was now 10 o'clock, and so rang and knocked again, but more impatiently, but still without response. Hitherto I had blamed only the servants, but now a terrible fear began to assail me. Was this desolation but another link in the chain of doom which seemed drawing tight round us? Was it indeed a house of death to which I had come too late? I know that minutes, even seconds of delay might mean hours of danger to Lucy if she had had again one of those frightful relapses, and I went round the house to try if I could find by chance an entry anywhere. I could find no means of ingress. Every window and door was fastened and locked, and I returned baffled to the porch. As I did so, I heard the rapid pit-pat of a swiftly driven horse's feet. They stopped at the gate, and a few seconds later I met Van Helsing running up the avenue. When he saw me, he gasped out, "Then it was you, and just arrived. How is she? Are we too late? Did you not get my telegram?" I answered as quickly and coherently as I could that I had only gotten a telegram early in the morning and had not lost a minute in coming here, and that I could not make anyone in the house hear me. He paused and raised his hat as he said solemnly, "Then I fear we are too late. God's will be done." With his usual recuperative energy, he went on, "Come, if there be no way open to get in, we must make one. Time is all in all to us now." We went round to the back of the house where there was a kitchen window. The professor took a small surgical saw from his case and, handing it to me, pointed to the iron bars which guarded the window. I attacked them at once and had very soon cut through 3 of them. Then with the long, thin knife, we pushed back the fastening of the sashes and opened the window. I held the and followed him. There was no one in the kitchen or in the servants' rooms, which were close at hand. We tried all the rooms as we went along, and in the dining room, dimly lit by rays of light through the shutters, lying on the floor. There was no need to think them dead, for the ceaseless breathing and the acrid smell of laudanum in the room left no doubt as to their condition. Van Helsing and I looked at each other, and as we moved away, he said, "We can attend to them later." Then we ascended to Lucy's room. For an instant or two, we paused at the door to listen, but there was no sound we could hear. With white faces and trembling hands, we opened the door gently and entered the room. How shall I describe what we saw? On the bed lay 2 women, Lucy and her mother. The latter lay farthest in, and she was covered with a white sheet, the edge of which had been blown back by the drop through the broken window, showing the drawn white face with a look of terror fixed upon it. By her side lay Lucy, with face white and still drawn. The flowers which had been found upon her mother's skin, and her throat was bare, showing the same that we had noticed before, which was horribly white and mangled. Without a word, the professor bent over the bed, his head almost touching poor Lucy's breast. Then he gave a quick turn of his head as of one who listens, and leaping to his feet, he cried out to me, "It is not yet too late. Quick, quick, bring the brandy." I flew downstairs and returned with it, taking care to smell and taste it, lest it too were drugged like the decanter of sherry which I found on the table. The patients were still breathing more restlessly, and I fancied that the narcotic was wearing off. I did not stay to make sure, but returned to Van Helsing. He rubbed the brandy, as on another occasion, on her lips and gums, and on her wrists and the palms of her hands. He said to me, "I can do this, all that can be at the present. You go wake those maids. Flick them in the face with a wet towel, and flick them hard. Make them get heat and fire and a warm bath. This poor soul is nearly as cold as that beside her. She will need be heated before we can do anything more." I went at once and found little difficulty in waking 3 of the women. The 4th was only a young girl, and the drug had evidently affected her more strongly, so I lifted her on the sofa and let her sleep. The others were dazed at first, but as remembrance came back to them, they cried and sobbed in a hysterical manner. I was stern with them, however, and would not let them talk. I told them that one life was bad enough to lose, and that if they delayed, they would sacrifice Miss Lucy. So, sobbing and crying, they went about their way, half clad as they were, in their fire and water. Fortunately, the kitchen and boiler fires were still alive, and there was no lack of hot water. We got a bath and carried Lucy out as she was and placed her in it. Whilst we were busy chafing her limbs, there was a knock at the hall door. One of the maids ran off, hurried on some more clothes, and opened it. Then she returned and whispered to us that there was a gentleman who had come with a message from Mr. Holmwood. I bade her simply tell him that he must wait, for we could see no one now. She went away with the message, and, engrossed with our work, I clean forgot all about him. I never saw in all my experience the professor work in such deadly earnest. I knew, as he knew, that it was a stand-up fight with death, and in a pause told him so. He answered me in a way that I did not understand, but with the sternest look that his face could wear. If that were all, I would stop here where we are now, and let her fade away into peace, for I see no light in life over her horizon. He went on with his work with, if possible, renewed and more frenzied vigor. Presently, we both began to be conscious that the heat was beginning to be of some effect. Lucy's heart beat a trifle more audibly to the stethoscope, and her lungs had a perceptible movement. Van Helsing's face almost beamed, and as we lifted her from the bath and rolled her in a hot sheet to dry her, he said to me, "The first game is ours. Check to the king." We took Lucy into another room, which had by now been prepared, and laid her in bed and forced a few drops of brandy down her throat. I noticed that Van Helsing tied a soft silk handkerchief round her neck. She was still unconscious, and quite as bad as, if not worse than, we had ever seen her. Van Helsing called in one of the women and told her to stay with her and not to take her eyes off her till we returned, and then beckoned me out of the room. "We must consult as to what is to be done," he said as we descended the stairs. In the hall, he opened the dining room door, and we passed in, he closing the door carefully behind him. The shutters had been opened, but the blinds were already down, with that obedience to the etiquette of death which the British woman of the lower classes always rigidly observes. The room was therefore dimly dark. It was, however, light enough for our purposes. Van Helsing's sternness was somewhat relieved by a look of perplexity. He was evidently torturing his mind about something, so I waited for an instant, and he spoke. "What are we to do now? Where are we to turn for help? We must have another transfusion of blood, and that soon, or that poor girl's life won't be worth an hour's purchase. You are exhausted already. I am exhausted too. I fear to trust those women, even if they would have courage to submit. What are we to do for someone who will open his veins for her?" "What's the matter with me, anyhow?" The voice came from the sofa across the room, and its tones brought relief and joy to my heart, for they were those of Quincy Morris. Van Helsing started angrily at the first sound, but his face softened, and a glad look came into his eyes as I cried out, "Quincy Morris!" and rushed towards him with outstretched hands. "What brought you here?" I cried as our hands met. "I guess art is the cause." He handed me a telegram. "Have not heard from Seward for 3 days, and am terribly anxious. Cannot leave. Father still in same condition. Send me word how Lucy is. Do not delay. Holmwood." I think I came just in the nick of time. You know you have only to tell me what to do. Van Helsing strode forward and took his hand, looking him straight in the eyes as he said, "A brave man's blood is the best thing on this earth when a woman is in trouble. You're a man and no mistake. Well, the devil may work against us for all he's worth, but God sends us men when we want them." Once again, we went through that ghastly operation. I have not the heart to go through with the details. Lucy had got a terrible shock, and it told on her more than before, for though plenty of blood went into her veins, her body did not respond to the treatment as well as on the other occasions. Her struggle back into life was something frightful to see and hear. However, the action of both heart and lungs improved, and Van Helsing made a subcutaneous injection of morphia, as before, and with good effect. Her face became a profound slumber. The professor watched whilst I went downstairs with Quincy Morris, and sent one of the maids to pay off one of the cabmen who were waiting. I left Quincy lying down after having a glass of wine and told the cook to get ready a good breakfast. Then a thought struck me, and I went back to the room where Lucy now was.
This is a pretty
When I came softly in, I found Van Helsing with a sheet or two of notepaper in his hand. He had evidently read it, and was thinking it over as he sat with his hand to his brow. There was a look of grim satisfaction in his face, as of one who has had a doubt solved. He handed me the paper, saying only, "It dropped from Lucy's breast when we carried her to the bath." When I had read it, I stood looking at the professor, and after a pause asked him, "In God's name, what does it all mean? Was she, or is she, mad? Or what sort of horrible danger is it?" I was so bewildered that I did not know what to say more. Van Helsing put out his hand and took the paper, saying, "Do not trouble about it now. Forget it for the present. You shall know and understand it all in good time, but it will be later. And now, what is it that you came to me to say?" This brought me back to fact, and I was all myself again. "I came to speak about the certificate of death. If we do not act properly and wisely, there may be an inquest, and that paper would have to be produced. I am in hopes that we need have no inquest, for if we had, it would surely kill poor Lucy, if nothing else did. I know, and you know, and the other doctor who attended her knows, that Mrs. Westenra had disease of the heart, and we can certify that she died of it. Let us fill the certificate at once, and I shall take it myself to the registrar and go on to the undertaker." "Good, oh my friend John. Well thought of. Truly Miss Lucy, if she be sad in the foes that beset her, is at least happy in the friends that love her. 1, 2, 3, all open their veins for her, besides one old man. Ah yes, I know, friend John, I am not blind. I love you all the more for it. Now go." In the hall I met Quincy Morris with a telegram for Arthur telling him that Mrs. Westenra was dead, that Lucy also had been ill but was now going on better, and that Van Helsing and I were with her. I told him where I was going, and he hurried me out, but as I was going said, "When you come back, Jack, may I have 2 words with you all to ourselves?" I nodded in reply and went out. I found no difficulty about the registration and arranged with the local undertaker to come up in the evening to measure for the coffin and to make arrangements. When I got back, Quincy was waiting for me. I told him I would see him as soon as I knew about Lucy, and went up to her room. She was still sleeping, and the professor seemingly had not moved from his seat at her side. From his putting his finger to his lips, I gathered that he expected her to wake before long, and was afraid of her stalling nature. So I went down to Quincy and took him into the breakfast room where the blinds were not drawn down, and which was a little more cheerful, or rather less cheerless, than the other rooms. When we were alone, he said to me, "Jack Stewart, I don't want to shove myself in anywhere where I've no right to be, but this is no ordinary case. You know I loved that girl and wanted to marry her, but although that's all past and gone, I can't help feeling anxious about her all the same. What is it that's wrong with her? The Dutchman, and a fine old fellow he is, I can see that, said that time you two came into room that you must have another transfusion of blood and that both you and he were exhausted. Now I know well that you medical men speak in camera and that a man must not expect to know what they consult about in private. But this is no common matter, and whatever it is, I have done my part. Is not that so?" "That's so," I said, and he went on, "I take it that both you and Van Helsing had done already what I did today. Is not that so?" "That's so." "And I guess Art was in it too. When I saw him 4 days ago down at his own place, he looked queer. I have not seen anything pulled down so quick since I was on the pampas. I had a mare that I was fond of go to grass all in one night. One of those big bats that they call vampires had got at her in the night, and what with his gorge and the vein left open, there wasn't enough blood in her to let her stand up, and I had to put a bullet through her as she lay. Jack, if you may tell me without betraying confidence, Arthur was the first. Is not that so?" As he spoke, the poor fellow looked terribly anxious. He was in a torture of suspense regarding the woman he loved, and his utter ignorance of the terrible mystery which seemed to surround her intensified his pain. His very heart was bleeding, and it took all the manhood of him, and there was a royal lot of it too, to keep him from breaking down. I paused before answering, for I felt that I must not betray anything which the professor wished kept secret. But already he knew so much, he guessed so much that there could be no reason for not answering. So I answered in the same phrase, "That's so." "And how long has this been going on?" "About 10 days." 10 days! Then I guess, Jack Stewart, that poor pretty creature that we all love has had put into her veins within that time the blood of 4 strong men. Man alive, her whole body wouldn't hold it. Then coming close to me, he spoke in a fierce half-whisper. "What took it out?" I shook my head. "That," I said, "is the clock. Van Helsing is simply frantic about it, and I am at my wit's end. I can't even hazard a guess. There has been a series of little circumstances which have thrown out all our calculations as to Lucy being properly watched, but these shall not occur again. Here we stay until all be well or ill." Quincy held out his hand. "Count me in," he said. "You and the Dutchman will tell me what to do, and I'll do it." When she woke late in the afternoon, Lucy's first movement was to feel in her breast, and to my surprise, produced the paper which Van Helsing had given me to read. The careful professor had replaced it where it had come from, lest on waking she should be alarmed. Her eyes then lit on Van Helsing and on me too, and gladdened. Then she looked round the room and seeing where she was, shuddered. She gave a loud cry and put her poor thin hands before her pale face. We both understood what was meant, that she realized to the full her mother's death. So we tried what we could to comfort her. Doubtless sympathy eased her somewhat, but she was very low in thought and spirit, and wept silently and weakly for a long time. We told her that either or both of us would now remain with her all the time, and that seemed to comfort her. Towards dusk she fell into a doze. Here a very odd thing occurred. Whilst still asleep, she took the paper from her breast and tore it in two. Van Helsing stepped over and took the pieces from her. All the same, however, she went on with the action of tearing, as though the material were still in her hands. Finally, she lifted her hands and opened them as if scattering the fragments. Van Helsing seemed surprised, and his brows gathered as if in thought, but he said nothing. 19 September. All last night she slept fitfully, being always afraid to sleep, and something weaker when she woke from it. The professor and I took in turns to watch, and we never left her for a moment unattended. Quincy Morris said nothing about his intention, but I knew that all night long he patrolled round and round the house. When the day came, its searching light showed the ravages in poor Lucy's strength. She was hardly able to turn her head, and the little nourishment which she could take seemed to do her no good. At times she slept, and both Van Helsing and I noticed the difference in her between sleeping and waking. Whilst asleep, she looked stronger, although more haggard, and her breathing was softer. Her open mouth showed the pale gums drawn back from the teeth, which thus looked positively longer and sharper than usual. When she woke, the softness of her eyes evidently changed the expression, for she looked her own self, although a dying one. In the afternoon she asked for Arthur, and telegraphed for him. Quincy went off to meet him at the station. When he arrived, it was nearly 6 o'clock, and the sun was setting full and warm, and the red light streamed in through the window and gave more color to the pale cheeks. When he saw her, Arthur was simply choking with emotion, and none of us could speak. In the hours that had passed, the fits of sleep, or the comatose condition that passed for it, had grown more frequent, so that the pauses when conversation was possible were shortened. Arthur's presence, however, seemed to act as a stimulant. She rallied a little, and spoke to him more brightly than she had done since we arrived. He too pulled himself together and spoke as cheerily as he could, so that the best was made of everything. It is now nearly 1 o'clock, and he and Van Helsing are sitting with her. I am to relieve them in a quarter of an hour, and I am entering this on Lucy's phonograph. Until 6 o'clock, they are to try to rest. I fear that tomorrow will end our watching, for the shock has been too great. The poor child cannot rally. God help us all. Letter, Nina Harker to Lucy Westenra. Unopened by her. 17 September. My dearest Lucy, it seems an age since I heard from you, or indeed since I wrote. You will pardon me, I know, for all my faults when you have read all my budget of news. When I got my husband back all right, well, I got my husband back all right. When we arrived at Exeter, there was a carriage waiting for us, and in it, although he had an attack of gout, Mr. Hawkins. He took us to his house where there were rooms for us all nice and comfortable, and we dined together. After dinner, Mr. Hawkins said, "My dears, I want to drink your health and prosperity, and may every blessing attend you both. I know you both from children, and have, with love and pride, seen you grow up. Now I want you to make your home here with me. I have left to me neither chick nor child, all are gone, and in my will I have left you everything." I cried, Lucy dear, as Jonathan and the old man clasped hands. Our evening was a very, very happy one. So here we are, installed in this beautiful old house, and from both my bedroom and the drawing room, I can see the great elms of the cathedral close, with their great black stems standing out against the old yellow stone of the cathedral, and I can hear the rooks overhead cawing and chattering and gossiping all day after the manner of rooks and humans. I am busy. I need not tell you, arranging things and housekeeping. Jonathan and Mr. Hawkins are busy all day. For, now that Jonathan is a partner,
Oh,
Mr. Hawkins wants to tell him
I gotta
all
go
about the
see a movie
clients.
with my friend from school.
How
Want
is
me
your
to
dear
call you
mother
after? I'll
getting
call you
on?
after.
I wish I could run
Bye,
up to
Kayla.
town for a day or two to see you, dear, but I dare not go yet, with so much on my shoulders, and Jonathan wants looking after still. He is beginning to put some flesh on his bones again, but he was terribly weakened by the long illness. Even now, he sometimes starts out of his sleep in a sudden way and awakes all trembling until I can coax him back to his usual placidity. However, thank God, these occasions grow less frequent as the days go on, and they will in time pass away altogether, I trust. And now I've told you my news. Let me ask yours. What are you to be married, and where? And who is to perform the ceremony, and what are you to wear? And is it to be a public or a private wedding? Tell me all about it, dear. Tell me all about everything, for there is nothing which interests you which will not be dear to me. Jonathan asks me to send his respectful duty, but I do not think that is good enough from the junior partner of the important firm Hawkins and Harker. And so, as you love me, and he loves me, and I love you with all the moods and tenses of the verb, I send you simply his love instead. Goodbye, my dearest Lucy, and all blessings on you. Yours, Mina Harker. Report from Patrick Hennessy, MD, MRCSLK, QCPI, etc., to John Stewart, MD, 20 September. My dear sir, in accordance with your wishes, I enclose report of the conditions of everything left in my charge. With regard to patient Renfield, there is more to say. He has had another outbreak, which might have had a dreadful ending, but which, as unfortunately happened, was unattended with any unhappy results. This afternoon, a carrier's cart with two men made a call at the empty house whose grounds abut on ours. The house to which, you will remember, the patient twice ran away. The men stopped at our gate to ask the porter their way, as they were strangers. I was myself looking out of the study window, having a smoke after dinner, and saw one of them come up to the house. As he passed the window of Renfield's room, the patient began to rate him from within, and called him all the foul names he could lay his tongue to. The man, who seemed a decent fellow enough, contented himself by telling him to shut up, poor foul-mouthed beggar. Whereupon our man accused him of robbing him, of wanting to murder him, and said that he would hinder him if he were to swing for it. I opened the window and signed to the man not to notice, so he contented himself after looking the place over and making up his mind as to what kind of a place he had got to by saying, "Lord bless you, sir, I wouldn't mind what was said to me in a bloomin' madhouse. I pity ye and the governor for having to live in the house with a wild beast like that." Then he asked his ways civilly enough, and I told him where the gate of the empty house was. He went away, followed by threats and curses and revilings from our man. I went down to see if I could make out any cause for his anger, since he is usually such a well-behaved man, and except his violent fits, nothing of the kind had ever occurred. I found him, to my astonishment, quite composed and most genial in his manner. I tried to get him to talk of the incident, but he blandly asked me questions as to what I meant, and led me to believe that he was completely oblivious of the affair. It was, I sorry to say, however, only another instance of his cunning. For within half an hour, I heard of him again. This time he had broken out through the